I'm Ava Morgan, 37 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I believed silence was strength. It made me invisible when I needed to hide, and small enough to survive when the room was too loud to hold me. I thought being quiet meant being good. I thought patience was the same as love. For most of my life, I mistook endurance for virtue. But silence doesn't heal you, it only teaches others that your voice can be ignored. I learned that the hard way, over dinner one rainy night in Seattle. The city had been humming all afternoon, fog rolling off Elliott Bay, lights flickering on the wet asphalt. I'd spent weeks planning that evening, the menu, the wine, even the table placement. I wanted everything perfect, elegant, sophisticated, proof that I'd become someone worth noticing. The restaurant sat on a hill above the harbor, glass walls framing the city I'd built my life in. Outside, ferries crawled across the water like tired ghosts. Inside, soft jazz floated through the air, the kind of music that pretends nothing bad could ever happen. My family was late, of course. They always were. I sat there waiting, smiling politely at the waiter, pretending not to notice the pity in his eyes. I told him, it's a family celebration, even though I didn't know what we were celebrating. Maybe the illusion of connection. Maybe my last attempt at it. When they finally arrived, I stood to greet them, my father in his old wool coat, my mother in pearls she never took off, my sister Caroline with her perfect posture and designer handbag swinging from her arm. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of a magazine cover called Success Done Right. She always did. Wow, she said, sliding into the booth beside Dad. Fancy place. You trying to impress someone? I laughed softly, ignoring the sting. Just wanted to treat you all. Dad took his seat, stretching his arms like a man who owned the room. Ava, this is expensive, isn't it? It's fine, I said. Business has been good. That was my first mistake, admitting success. My father didn't like hearing I'd done something he didn't understand. My sister didn't like it either, unless she could take credit for it. The waiter poured wine. We clinked glasses. For a few minutes, we pretended to be normal, talking about weather, traffic, Caroline's kids, the new house she and her husband had bought. They never asked about my life, my company, my projects. And I didn't bring them up. I'd learned that sharing good news only made the silence heavier. But tonight was supposed to be different. I had something to give them, something I'd spent months preparing. I thought generosity might bridge what time had broken. I waited until the main course arrived. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 white envelopes, sliding them across the table. I have a surprise, I said, smiling, my heart fluttering. Something special for all of us. Caroline raised an eyebrow, always the skeptic. What's this? Tickets, I said. First class to Maui. A family trip. I thought it'd be nice to spend a week together. No work, no stress, just us. Her fingers tore through the envelope before I finished speaking. She glanced at the ticket, then leaned back, a smirk curling on her lips. You're still trying to buy our love, huh, Ava? Her voice carried farther than she realized. Or maybe she wanted it to. My father chuckled, setting down his wine glass. No one here actually likes you, he said, his tone loud, careless, final. The kind of sentence that splits a life in half. The table fell quiet. A fork clinked against porcelain. My mother twisted her napkin until it looked like rope. She didn't say a word. She never does. Something in me cracked, not like glass, but like ice breaking apart. Slow, clean, irreversible. I smiled. Understood, I said quietly, and stood up. Dad's laugh followed me as I walked out, sharp and lazy. Caroline's perfume lingered behind me like arrogance in the air. I felt every eye in the restaurant as I pushed open the door. Outside, the wind cut through my coat, the rain slicking my hair against my face. My phone buzzed before I even reached the car. A text from Caroline, "Good luck buying respect." I stared at the screen for a long time, then turned it off. Respect. The word echoed in my head. I had spent my whole life earning it in currencies that meant nothing to them, grades, achievements, money, awards. But no matter what I built, they still saw the quiet girl in the corner, holding a blue ribbon no one cared about. When I was 10, I built a robot from spare parts, little wheels, blinking lights, a metal shell that rattled when it moved. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. It rolled across the classroom floor, and everyone clapped. I'd never heard that sound before. Applause meant for me. I came home grinning, ribbon in hand, breathless to tell Dad. He didn't look up from his newspaper. Caroline's speech might win state, he said. Caroline smiled. Some people just aren't built for attention, she teased. I laughed with her, because crying wasn't allowed. That night, I took the robot apart. I told myself I needed the parts for something else. The truth is, I couldn't stand looking at something I was proud of. Years later, when I wrote my first line of code, I felt the same spark, that quiet thrill of making something that worked. Code listened. It didn't talk back. It didn't mock. It didn't forget. I spent hours in front of an old computer, typing until my fingers hurt. What are you doing? Dad asked one night, stepping into my room. Just messing around, I said. Well, he muttered, don't let it distract you from real life. He didn't know that what he called messing around would one day build my life. By college, I was selling small apps online, earning enough to pay tuition without their help. Caroline studied marketing, a real career, Dad said, clapping her on the shoulder. I studied computer science. Just make sure you don't overwork yourself, he'd tell me, like my ambition was a disease. When I launched my first big app, a task manager that went viral, I called home. My voice shook with excitement. Dad, I said, they bought it. A tech company, they're paying $8 million. That's nice, he said. Caroline just got promoted. Mom sent a card. Printed. No handwriting. I thought maybe money would change things. That success was a universal language. But they spoke another dialect, one where Caroline was always the hero, and I was the quiet proof of what she wasn't. So I built walls of work around myself. I moved to Seattle, rented a condo with glass walls and views of the harbor. I filled it with light and quiet, the kind of silence I could finally control. My company grew. My face appeared in magazines. People invited me to panels, to speak about innovation. They clapped. They listened. Strangers saw me, but the people I loved never did. At every Christmas dinner, Dad would ask Caroline about her campaigns, her new clients, her salary. Mom would nod, smile, refill wine glasses. I'd sit there, invisible, listening to a story I was no longer part of. Once, I mentioned that I'd won a National Tech Award. Caroline laughed. For geek stuff? Dad chuckled. Mom looked away. I learned to swallow pride like medicine, bitter, necessary, and tasteless. That's why I planned that dinner. That hopeful, stupid dinner. Because somewhere inside, a 10-year-old girl was still holding that blue ribbon, still waiting for someone to say, "We're proud of you." After I walked out that night, I drove home in silence. The rain tapped the windshield like fingers on glass. In my head, I replayed every moment: Caroline's smirk, Dad's laughter, Mom's silence. The sound of my own voice saying, "Understood." At a red light, I pulled over, opened the Notes app on my phone, and typed, "Stop asking permission to exist." Then, below it, "Act like a woman who believes herself." The next morning, I woke early. The city was still gray, the air cold. I made coffee, stood by the window watching the ferries crawl through fog. The skyline shimmered faintly in the distance: steel, glass, and effort. My effort. I opened my laptop and typed an email to my lawyer. Subject: the Bainbridge House. It was my inheritance from my grandfather, Victor Morgan, the only person in my family who had ever truly seen me. Sell it, I wrote. Start today. By evening, a developer offered $2 million cash. No questions, no delays. I signed. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud and messy. This was quiet and precise, a surgical cut through years of guilt. 3 days later, Dad called. His voice thundered through the phone. "What the hell did you do, Ava? That house was our legacy." "Our?" I asked softly. "You never even visited it." He sputtered, shouted something about family, about loyalty, about how I was selfish. I listened until the noise collapsed under its own weight, then hung up. 10 minutes later, Caroline texted. "You betrayed us. Grandpa would be ashamed." I stared at her words and felt nothing. I deleted the message and went back to work. That night, I dreamed of my grandfather's porch, the old cedar steps, the smell of salt and pine, his voice saying, "You're a builder, kiddo. Build what you wish existed." When I woke, I realized I'd finally done exactly that. But cutting ties doesn't mean the wound stops bleeding. The days that followed felt strange, lighter, but raw. Every decision echoed in the silence they left behind. For the first time in years, no one was asking me for money. No guilt-filled calls. No passive-aggressive texts. Just quiet. And yet, I kept waiting for something. Maybe an apology. Maybe a thank you. It never came. That was when Noah stepped in. We'd known each other for years, colleagues first, co-founders later, friends somewhere in between. He had a quiet steadiness that reminded me of solid ground, a way of listening that made the air softer around him. The first time we met, he'd said, "You build things that make people's lives easier." I'd shrugged, embarrassed. "It's just code." He smiled. "No, it's structure. You make chaos understandable." He found me at a cafe near the office, a place that smelled like espresso and rain. "You disappeared after the dinner," he said, pulling out a chair. "Everything okay?" I hesitated. The truth felt too heavy to unwrap in public. But the words came anyway. "My father told me no one in our family actually likes me." He blinked. "He said that? Out loud?" Loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. Noah exhaled slowly. "And your sister?" "She laughed," I said. "My mom stayed quiet." He shook his head, eyes dark. "You've been carrying that for a long time, haven't you?" I wanted to say no. But my throat wouldn't let me. We sat there in silence for a while, the cafe filling with the sound of clinking cups. Then Noah asked, "You ever think about how much of your life you've spent trying to earn their approval?" "I think about it every day," I said. He nodded. Then maybe it's time to stop paying rent in a house that's never going to be yours. I smiled weakly. You sound like my therapist. He grinned. Then you should probably listen. We talked for hours. I told him about selling the Bainbridge house, about the arguments, about the text from Caroline. When I mentioned the family trust, his expression shifted. Caroline manages it? Yes. I set it up years ago. College funds for her kids, medical expenses for my parents. I thought it'd make things easier. Noah frowned. When's the last time you checked the records? I haven't. He leaned forward. You trust her that much? I looked down at my coffee. I trusted the idea of family. He was quiet for a moment. Let me help you check it. 2 weeks later, we were in his apartment surrounded by the soft hum of rain against the windows. His laptop glowed between us, spreadsheets and statements filling the screen. Line by line, transaction by transaction, he dug deeper into the numbers than I ever had. It didn't take long to find it. $500,000, gone. The records were clear. Caroline had been siphoning money for over a year. Some transfers went to a startup she tried to launch, an influencer app with no real product, just marketing gloss and empty promises. When it failed, the rest of the money went into luxury purchases, designer handbags, a leased BMW, vacations that looked like photo shoots. I sat there, numb, staring at the screen. She used the trust as her personal wallet, I whispered. Noah's jaw tightened. She thought you'd never notice. A bitter laugh escaped me. And she was right. I never would have looked. I thought I was protecting them. He turned to me. No, Ava. You were feeding wolves who learned to smile. For the first time, I didn't rush to defend them. I didn't say, they didn't mean it. I just sat there, staring at the proof of what I already knew in my bones. They never saw me as family. Just as function. What are you going to do? He asked quietly. I looked out the window. The city lights blurred through the rain, streaks of gold and blue. I'm going to end it. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Her voice was crisp, professional. You're sure about this? She asked. Yes, I said. Transfer what's left of the trust, about $1 million, to the Ava Morgan Foundation. I wanted to fund scholarships for foster girls who want to study tech. No loopholes, no family access. She hesitated. And your sister? She'll find out when the balance hits zero. The paperwork was filed within the week. I didn't post about it. I didn't announce it. But word travels fast when people lose their lifeline. 3 days later, my father called. His voice was thunder again. You're punishing us. That money was for the family. It was my money, I said. And I gave it to a family that needs it more. You've lost your mind, Ava. You're tearing this family apart. I almost laughed. Dad, I stopped holding it together. There's a difference. He cursed, his breath crackling through the line, then hung up. Caroline didn't call. But the silence spoke louder than any apology. 2 weeks later, I opened my laptop and saw her name trending locally. A business journal had published an article about financial irregularities in her agency. The words were polite, but the subtext was blood. Within days, clients began dropping her. The firm issued a statement filled with corporate regret. We are aware of ongoing concerns and are taking steps toward transparency. Transparency. The word made me laugh. It arrives late, and always dressed for a funeral. At first, I felt nothing. Then guilt crept in. that old familiar ache. I'd spent my entire life cushioning her falls. My success was her safety net. But this time, I didn't move. A week later, I was having lunch with Noah at a small bistro near the water. He handed me a newspaper folded to the financial section. "You made the front page," he said. My stomach tightened. "What?" He smiled faintly. "Not you directly. The foundation." A reporter called it a quiet act of rebellion. I read the headline twice. Seattle entrepreneur redirects millions to fund tech scholarships for foster girls. The article didn't mention my family. But they must have seen it. I could almost picture my father's jaw tightening, Caroline's wine glass shaking in her hand. "How does it feel?" Noah asked. I closed the paper slowly. "Like breathing." He nodded. "Then keep breathing. But peace never lasts long when people can't stand seeing you free." One morning, I woke to a flood of messages. Friends. Colleagues. Even distant cousins. Caroline had posted on a local community page, a long, dramatic rant about how I'd betrayed the family, how I'd stolen from our parents, and used my money to destroy their legacy. She even uploaded old photos of us, smiling, arm in arm, captioned, "This is what betrayal looks like." The comments section was a battlefield. Some people defended me. Others called me cold, ungrateful, heartless. I read every word, feeling my pulse slow until I was almost calm. Noah called. "Don't engage," he said. "She wants a fight." "I'm not giving her one." "Good," he said softly. "Because the truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs time." He was right. A month later, auditors released their findings. $500,000 misappropriated from a family trust, luxury expenses disguised as business costs, falsified invoices. Caroline was finished. When the article went public, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Years of resentment had burned themselves out, leaving only ash. Dad called again. His voice had lost its thunder. "We could have handled this privately," he said. "Why humiliate us?" "I didn't," I said. "You did that yourselves." "You're so ungrateful," he hissed. "After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. "You mean after everything I've done for you?" He didn't reply. The line went quiet. Then he hung up. The next day, I got an email from Mom. It was short, 4 sentences. "We're disappointed. Family is supposed to forgive. You've gone too far." No signature. I stared at the screen, waiting to feel something. I didn't. That evening, Noah came over with takeout. He found me sitting on the floor, laptop open, unread messages piling up. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "It's strange. I thought cutting them off would hurt more." He sat beside me. "Maybe it's not that it doesn't hurt. Maybe it's just pain you're no longer willing to carry." I looked at him. "I don't know what to do next." "Live," he said simply. "For yourself this time." That night, I dreamed of the Bainbridge house again, the cedar porch, the salt in the air, my grandfather's laugh. In the dream, he handed me a hammer and said, "Build something better." When I woke, I knew what he meant. I decided to start a foundation in his name, the Ava Morgan Fund for Girls in Tech. A place where girls like me, quiet, curious, unseen, could build something without apology. The launch was small, just a press release and a website. But within weeks, donations poured in. Schools reached out. Mentors volunteered. It was as if the universe had been waiting for me to stop apologizing and start leading. Meanwhile, Caroline's world was collapsing. Her firm dropped her. Her clients vanished. She posted an apology online, carefully worded, half sincere, half self-pity. "I take full responsibility," she wrote, "but I was under a lot of pressure." Pressure. The eternal scapegoat. No one bought it. Within months, she'd moved out of her luxury condo and back into my parents' house. My father's pride became debt. My mother's silence became shame. I didn't gloat. I didn't visit. I didn't send flowers. For the first time, I understood what peace actually feels like. Not joy, not revenge. Just stillness. But stillness can be terrifying when you've lived your whole life in noise. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, half expecting another demand, another guilt trip. When none came, I'd put it down again. Freedom is disorienting at first. It feels like losing gravity. One evening, Noah and I walked along the harbor. The air was sharp with salt, the water black and glimmering. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About what comes next." He smiled. "That's the first time I've heard you say that without a plan attached." I laughed. "Maybe I don't need one this time." He took my hand, our fingers fitting together like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Maybe that's the point. We stopped at the edge of the pier. The wind tugged at my hair. The city glowed behind us, its reflection trembling on the water. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small against the skyline. I felt equal to it. But freedom has a way of attracting ghosts. 2 months later, a letter arrived, handwritten, the envelope familiar. My mother's cursive. I hesitated before opening it. "Ava," it began. "Your father isn't well. He's been stressed since the lawsuit. We don't have much left. If you could find it in your heart to help us just this once, it would mean a lot. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a request." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Then I sat at my desk and stared out at the city until night fell. When Noah called later, I told him about it. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. "No," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "That's okay too." The next morning, I mailed the letter back. No note inside. Just one word written across the top in blue ink. Understood. I didn't hear from them again after that letter. The silence that followed was vast, clean. It filled the spaces they used to occupy, the guilt, the noise, the endless expectation. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter, or the sister, or the disappointment trying to redeem herself. I was just Ava. In the weeks that followed, I filled my days with work, but it didn't feel like work anymore. I'd step into the office and see the engineers laughing over coffee, the interns scribbling ideas on whiteboards, the glow of monitors painting everyone's faces in soft light. It felt like a family I had built from code and kindness, one that didn't ask me to shrink. The Victor Morgan Fund had its first official board meeting that spring. We sat around a reclaimed wood table, the smell of coffee mixing with the faint buzz of anticipation. On the agenda were 5 new scholarship recipients, 5 girls who reminded me of my younger self. One of them, Maya, barely 19, had already designed a prototype for a language learning app for foster kids who'd moved through multiple schools. When she spoke, her hands shook slightly, but her voice didn't. "I just want kids like me to have one less reason to feel behind," she said. I smiled. "Then let's make sure they don't." The room applauded softly. And I realized something then. Legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you build while you're still here. But even as the foundation grew, there were moments the past came knocking, subtle, persistent. A familiar song on the radio. The smell of my mother's perfume in a crowded elevator. Little reminders that love, even when poisoned, still leaves fingerprints on the soul. One night, I found myself driving toward Bainbridge Island without meaning to. The ferry ride was quiet, just a handful of passengers staring into the dark. I hadn't been back since I sold the house. The developer had torn it down, replaced it with a sleek glass structure overlooking the water. I parked on the shoulder and sat there, headlights off, the sea whispering below. It should have hurt, but it didn't. The house was gone, but the memory remained, my grandfather sitting on the porch, carving wood, telling me that truth doesn't need to shout. You just have to live it, he'd said. I whispered into the dark, I'm trying, Grandpa. A tear slid down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. Some tears are earned. When I drove back to Seattle, the city lights looked softer, less like judgment and more like possibility. Noah was waiting for me when I got home. He'd made tea, chamomile, my favorite. He took one look at my face and didn't ask where I'd been. He just handed me the cup. We sat on the couch in silence for a long time. The hum of the city outside filled the room like background music. Finally, I said, do you ever think about how endings can be beautiful even when they hurt? He nodded. Only every day. I smiled faintly. I keep thinking about them, my parents, Caroline. What they must be doing now. Part of me still wants to fix it. Noah turned to me. Ava, some people don't want to be fixed. They want to be right. I nodded slowly. And I don't want to fight anymore. He touched my hand. You already won. But victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like an empty house finally quiet after years of noise. In the months that followed, Noah's company got an offer, a merger with a tech giant based in Chicago. It was everything he'd worked for, everything he deserved. When he told me over dinner, I smiled. That's incredible, I said. He studied my face carefully. There's a catch. They want me there. In person. For at least a year. I felt something twist inside. When do you leave? 3 weeks. We sat there, both of us quiet. The clink of silverware from other tables filled the air between us. I want you to come with me, he said finally. Seattle's been good to you, but maybe it's time for a new chapter. I stared at the candle flickering between us. I can't, I whispered. The foundation, it's just starting. I owe it to them. He nodded, not angry, just sad. I figured you'd say that. We didn't break up, not officially. But sometimes endings don't need announcements. They just arrive softly, like winter light fading earlier each day. When he left, the apartment felt different. The air hung heavier, the rooms bigger. His favorite mug stayed on the counter for weeks before I moved it to the cupboard. I told myself it was temporary, but deep down, I knew better. There's a kind of loneliness that isn't empty. It's sacred. The kind that comes when you finally stop running toward people who keep walking away. One rainy morning, I walked into my office to find an envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. Ava, it said. I wanted to tell you that your father passed away last month. It was sudden. Heart failure. He talked about you near the end, said he wished he'd handled things differently. I don't know if that's true or just what I want to believe. Caroline's struggling. She lost her job and moved out of state. I don't expect you to come. I just thought you should know. There was no closing, no signature. Just that. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, my hands trembling slightly. I thought about calling. About driving down. About saying goodbye. But there are some wounds you can't heal in a single visit. That night, I walked down to the harbor. The rain was steady, the wind cold enough to sting. I stood there, watching the ferries move through the mist, their lights glowing faintly through the fog. I whispered, "Goodbye, Dad," and let the sound of the waves carry it away. The next day, I went back to work. The world didn't pause for grief. It never does. But something inside me shifted, not broken, not healed, just quieter. Weeks passed. The foundation flourished. We partnered with universities, hosted mentorship programs, funded a small lab where girls could design their own software projects. Each success filled me with a warmth that didn't feel borrowed. It was mine. But at night, when the city went still, I'd sometimes catch myself scrolling through old photos, family vacations, birthdays, Caroline and me in matching dresses. For a few seconds, I'd almost believe we could go back. Then reality would return, sharp but merciful. One evening, I got a message from an unknown number. "Ava, it's Caroline. I heard about Dad. I know you probably hate me, but I'm in trouble. I need help. Please." I stared at the screen. My pulse stayed steady. I typed and deleted several replies. Finally, I wrote one sentence. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Then I hit send. I didn't block her. I just let silence answer where words no longer could. Months turned into seasons. The foundation celebrated its one-year anniversary with a small gala, nothing fancy, just people who cared. The girls I'd mentored gave speeches about dreams that now felt possible. One of them, Maya, found me afterward and handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a keychain, a tiny robot made of scrap metal, its eyes two tiny blue beads. "I made it," she said shyly. "Because of your story about the robot you built as a kid." I smiled, my throat tightening. "You remembered." "Of course. You said it was the first thing you ever built." I nodded. "It was also the first thing I destroyed." Maya looked confused. "Why?" I thought for a moment. "Because someone I loved told me it didn't matter." She frowned. "Then they were wrong." I laughed softly, the kind that feels like sunlight after rain. "Yeah. They were." After she left, I sat alone in the empty hall, holding the little robot in my palm. It was rough and imperfect, but it gleamed under the lights. For the first time, I didn't want to put it away. Later that night, as I walked home through the quiet streets, I thought about how far I'd come, from the girl who begged for approval to the woman who built her own meaning. And yet, there was a small ache still lodged somewhere deep, not pain, exactly, but memory. I reached my apartment, set the robot on my desk, and poured myself a glass of wine. The city shimmered through the window. Somewhere out there, Caroline was trying to start over. My mother was probably sitting in the dark, wondering if silence still counted as loyalty. And Noah, maybe he was walking along the lake in Chicago, thinking of me the way I thought of him, with gratitude, not longing. I lifted my glass to the skyline. "To what remains," I whispered. The air didn't answer. It didn't have to. A week later, I gave a talk at a tech summit in Portland. The theme was building beyond survival. I told my story, not all of it, just enough. How success doesn't erase loneliness. How love without respect is just habit. How sometimes the people who raised you are the ones you have to outgrow. Afterward, a woman in her 50s approached me. Her eyes were wet. "My daughter stopped talking to me 2 years ago," she said. "After your talk, I think I understand why." "Thank you." I smiled gently. "It's never too late to listen," I said. When I drove back to Seattle that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Months later, on a quiet summer evening, I received another letter, this one from my mother. The handwriting was smaller, shakier. "Ava," it read. "I saw your interview on television. You looked happy. I hope you are. I'm sorry for everything I didn't say when I should have. Love, Mom." I read it twice. Then a third time. There were no excuses, no demands, just a simple apology. The one I'd been waiting for my entire life. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call her. I just folded the letter neatly and placed it beside the small robot on my desk. That night, I stood by the window as the city lights blinked like scattered constellations. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed, the little girl clutching her ribbon, the woman at the restaurant table, the one who whispered, understood, and walked away. They were all still here, stitched together in silence and survival, grief and grace. And for the first time, I didn't want to fix any of them. I whispered to my reflection, "You did it. You finally built what you wished existed." Outside, the fairy lights glimmered across the bay, and the rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, infinite. I closed my eyes, listening to its rhythm, the heartbeat of a city that had seen me break and rebuild more times than I could count. Some stories don't end with forgiveness or family reunions. Some end with peace, quiet, imperfect, and your own. I am Ava Morgan. Daughter of silence. Architect of my own voice. And though the world around me hums and rushes and forgets, I remember. I don't need their light to shine. I am luminous on my own.